Want to pull off triple backstabs or disappear into a deadly swarm of butterflies and steel? Then Sirin might be your pact. She's all about deception and misdirection. They won't see you coming, and if you play her right, they won't get a chance to react at all. Sirin is a Grace attuned starter pact. If you picked a different one at the beginning, you will need to join the Silent Rose faction and unlock it there. It becomes available for purchase at faction rank 2. Let's start with her first ability. Glamour lets your envoy dissolve into a swirling swarm of butterflies. While in this form, you are completely invisible to most enemies. There are exceptions, like Nimrod's lightning strike, which will still target you, but in general, enemies won't attack you. The duration is 10 seconds plus your spirit stat. Even with base values, that's usually enough. No extra investment needed here. There is an optional build variant that leans into spirit for longer uptime, but we will touch on that later. You move more slowly and most direct actions will break the ability. No jumping, no sprinting, no attacking. And if you get hit by lingering AoEs or anything that targeted you right before the transformation finishes, you will snap right back to normal. But what can you do? First, you can trigger a backstab finisher. Just move behind an enemy to trigger the prompt. This will also end Glamour, but it gives you a strong opener against any key target. Second, you can use potions while invisible. So if things go bad, disappear and quietly chuck your way back to full. No need to rush, no risk being interrupted. Third, you can loot. Chests and loot bags both work while you are in Glamour. That means you can skip right past guards and still grab everything on the way out. Perfect for rushing through an area without missing any treasure. And if that's your goal, this is one of the few spots where a spirit-focused Glamour build really pays off. Just one heads up, picking up loot bags in Glamour can be a bit tricky. You will need precise positioning to trigger the pickup prompt, especially if the bag dropped close to an enemy. Sometimes their collider blocks the interaction until they move. And grabbing the bag might make nearby enemies glance around for a second or two, but it doesn't actually alert them. So most of the time, it's just more comfortable to grab the bags after the fight. And there's one exciting little trick. Smites don't break Glamour. So if you activate orbit blades of your flyblade, then quickly switch weapons, which extends their duration if you have unlocked the first node in the flyblade tree. The blades will keep spinning while you are invisible, and you can move right into the enemy group. You stay hidden as the blades chip away at them, triggering 1 or 2 smites along the way, all while you remain unseen. You get free damage, healing, and then when it's all over, you're already in a perfect position to follow up with the backstab finisher. It's like transforming into one of Titania's razor wing pets, drifting through the battlefield, blades swirling around you, enemies falling before they even know you are there. Now, there's a downside. The transformation itself is a bit slow, and if anything hits you during it, you will be kicked out immediately. There's a way around that, and it comes from combining this with Picktrix Powder. More on that in its own section later on. And last but not least, yes, you can use Glamour to Pickpocket, which brings us to a passive that pairs directly with this ability. Pickpocket is a passive node that triggers when you are very close to an enemy who hasn't noticed you yet. This is always the case while you are in Glamour and out of combat, but it can also work when sneaking up normally behind an unaware enemy. You need to stay near your target for a short duration, which depends on your rank in the ability. At max rank, simply walking past in Glamour is enough to trigger it automatically. You will know it worked when a small burst of blue sparkles appear and the enemy immediately dropped their loot bag before they even die. In some cases, they might even drop a second one on death, possibly a bug, but it happens. So, if you open every encounter by gliding through in Glamour and brushing past enemies, you've already got potential healing potions waiting on the ground before the fight even starts. It also boosts your overall loot rate considerably. While leveling Sirin, it felt like I was drowning in dregs compared to the other pacts. It's a flavorful, high payoff passive that fits perfectly into Sirin's stealth loop. Use it and enjoy the free loot along the way. That's it for utility. But now, let's talk about damage and where Sirin starts to really mess with the enemy. This is Trick of Light. This ability creates a decoy at the position you are aiming at. If an enemy comes close, there's a short delay, about 4 seconds, and then the decoy explodes. If no enemy approaches, it lingers for a little over 10 seconds before fading away. The explosion deals around 200 damage in a small area. The damage does scale with courage, but the increase is so minor it's basically irrelevant. The real strength of Trick of Light lies in how it can draw aggro, but it's not a guaranteed taunt. It depends on line of sight and distance. Enemy aggro is a bit unpredictable, but here's what tends to work. If the decoy is in their line of sight and you are farther away, they will almost always go for it. If both you and the decoy are nearby, most enemies will still go for the decoy, but some, like archers, might stay locked on you, especially if the decoy isn't right up in their face. If they are facing away from the decoy when it appears, they usually ignore it completely. Now, here's the big part. When an enemy is focused on the decoy, it opens up the same backstab finisher prompt you would get from sneaking up in Glamour. Which means, with good timing, you can land multiple finishers in a row before the decoy detonates. And even for about a second after the explosion. This behavior unlocks a few very useful applications. Let's go through them. First, grouping enemies for AoE. If you create some distance, then drop the decoy right in front of a group. Most of them will instantly turn toward it and close in. You won't be in backstab range, but that's fine, because now all the melee enemies are bunching up around the decoy. Follow that with a couple hails of arrows and you've got an easy high impact AoE rotation with a free 200 damage burst at the end. It's simple, but it works beautifully. Second, creating backstab windows. This one is a bit trickier. If you're already close to a target, drop the decoy right in front of their face. They will pause and focus on it, giving you time to circle behind and stab them. The issue is, maneuvering takes time. You will usually only land one, maybe two finishers before they aggro on you again, especially in a group. It works, but it's not optimal on its own. And that's where the third ability comes in, the one that ties everything together. Picktrix Powder is basically a flashbang, but instead of throwing it, the effect triggers directly at the spot you aim. Everything in that radius gets blinded for about 3 seconds. That radius increases with grace, but the blind duration doesn't scale. Enemies affected just stand there doing nothing and take a small tick of damage. This ability has an extremely short cooldown, and with the Akin node maxed out, you can throw one every few seconds. Even on its own, that's strong. You can use this to set up 2 arrow hails on frozen groups, safely activate orbit blades, or land multi-hit melee combos without worrying about getting interrupted. But where Picktrix Powder really shines is in combination with your other 2 abilities. The first synergy to look at is with Glamour. Its biggest weakness is how easily it can be interrupted. The transformation takes time, and a single stray hit will cancel the whole thing. With the Picktrix Powder in their face, no problem. Just throw it and then calmly activate orbit blades, swap weapons to extend the timer, and then transform into your Razor Wing form. They will be standing there, blinded, and you are now invisible and fully set up for your next move. One more thing before we move on. Picktrix Powder has a secondary effect. It resets enemy aggro. Blinded enemies lose their current target, and once the effect ends, they will look for a new one. For example, when the blindness ends, a previously blinded enemy might switch aggro to an already placed decoy, even one behind them, as long as it's now closer than you. This doesn't pull them out of combat, but it pairs perfectly with Trick of Light, which seems to benefit the most when enemies are in that blank aggro state. The second combo builds around Trick of Light. This one is great for clearing groups. Start with Picktrix Powder to blind and de-aggro the group. Immediately charge up 1 or 2 arrow hails and then place the decoy right in front of the group, ideally overlapping the last second of the blind duration. Since their aggro was reset, chances are most of them will now lock onto the decoy. They bunch up, you fire off another 2 or 3 arrow hails, and the Trick of Light explosion finishes it all off. Simple chain, extremely effective. The third synergy lets you line up backstab after backstab, if you time it right. Here's a weird quirk. Picktrix Powder usually disable backstabs while enemies are blinded. And that's where this combo comes in. Throw Picktrix Powder at your target. Count 2 seconds in your head while walking straight behind them. Then just before the blind ends, place your decoy right in front of their face. As the enemy recovers, they see the decoy, pause, and you are already behind them. That gives you a full backstab window the moment they react. You can land 1, 2, or even 3 finishers in a row this way, if your timing is tight enough. Too early and the blind blocks a finisher. too late and they turn on you. It's a narrow timing window, but it feels incredibly rewarding when it clicks. I've pulled off 3 backstabs in a single chain, no idea if 4 is possible. If you manage it, let us know. Small bonus tip. Picktrix Powder can actually mass break containers thanks to its wide radius. This is great for quickly collecting loot in dungeons without having to attack every single jar. And that's it for mechanics. Now let's look at how to build around them and turn it all into an actual combat rotation. Sirin is one of the most balanced feeling pacts in the game. All 3 of their abilities have a clear role. Nothing feels like a filler button. When it comes to virtue investment, Grace is your default. It increases the range of Picktrix Powder, and since it also gives the highest base value, you will get the best weapon damage from Grace attuned gear. There's an alternate path with Spirit, but it comes with a trade-off. You will do slightly less damage, but gain longer Glamour duration. That's only really worth it if you're building around overworld chest farming and loot runs. For regular gameplay, the base 15 seconds of Glamour are already enough. Now to weapon choice. Right now, fly blades are the best side hand option, mostly because of the synergy with orbit blades and Glamour. For main hand, both are top pick. They give you area coverage for clustered enemies, work perfectly with Trick of Light, and most importantly, they have fast backstab animations, which is critical if you want to chain multiple finishers. Spears, on the opposite side, are a bit clunky in this context. They tend to knock enemies prone on backstab and have longer animations, which makes it hard to land more than 1 in a row. They are great for other packs, just not ideal for Sirin's finisher chaining. So the core loadout I would recommend is Juniper for the main hand and Skilter for the side hand. Yeah, I know, recommending both isn't exactly a revelation at this point, but for Sirin it's just the most synergistic choice. Now to the skill tree setup. Like for most pacts, max out Akin and Sympathy. They are essential for short cooldowns and healing. Personally, I go all in with 4 points in Pickpocket. I want a smooth engagement flow where I can tag every enemy for loot within the 15-second Glamour window and still open with a clean backstab. But you can also get away with 2 or 3 points, especially if you're leaning into Spirit instead of Grace. If you invest heavily into Pickpocket, you won't be able to max out Soulbound, which is the next priority for point distribution. But that's fine. Siri isn't about tanking hits, and you won't need the extra HP if you're playing her as intended. Unseen, untouchable, and always in control of the fight. Any leftover points should go into Grace for more damage, or Spirit if you are pushing longer Glamour windows or utility. Quick note before we go into the rotations. The Razor Wing transformation, like we covered in the Glamour section, is mainly there for survivability, healing and lining up your cooldowns, all while adding a bit of damage. If you're in a group or the enemies are weak enough, feel free to skip it altogether and just keep smashing things with your weapon of choice. So your core rotation looks like this. Start with Glamour. Fly past every enemy to trigger Pickpocket. Pick a key target and open the fight with a backstab. From here, decide whether you go for an AoE burst or a finisher chaining. If you are going for AoE, here's how to set it up. First, create some distance from the enemy group. Then, throw Picktrix Powder to blind and de-aggro them. Fire your first hail of arrows. As the blind starts fading, drop Trick of Light right in front of the group. Then, fire as many hails as you can while they bunch up, usually 2, maybe 3. When the decoy is about to vanish, kite the group for a second or 2 while waiting for Picktrix Powder to come off cooldown. Re-blind them. Then activate Orbit Blades, swap weapons and transform into Glamour Razor Wing mode. While hidden, let the Smites do their work. Then, while still in Glamour, wait for Trick of Light to come off cooldown. Reposition and line up your next backstab. Rinse and repeat. If you are aiming for backstab chains instead, the setup looks a little different. Skip the AoE part entirely. Open with Picktrix Powder to blind your primary target. Immediately move behind them and count about 2 seconds in your head while closing in. Just before the blind ends, place Trick of Light directly in front of their face. As they recover, they will see the decoy and shift aggro, opening a window for multiple backstabs. Land as many finishers as you can. 3 is standard if your timing is tight, but you will usually only get 2 if you are a bit off. Once the finisher window closes, reblind with Picktrix Powder if the cooldown is ready. Then activate Orbit Blades, swap weapons and transform into Razor Wing form. Stay in Glamour while waiting for Trick of Light to reset, smiting enemies along the way. Reposition behind your next target and line up another backstab chain. Rinse and repeat. There are some enemies that break the flow a bit. Dogs and the corrupted wood specters are mostly immune to Picktrix Powder. The specters also don't respond to the decoy the same way human enemies do. They will target you more directly and the fights become harder to control. In these cases, you will have to activate Orbit Blades, place a decoy and try to transform it to Glamour without being hit. If successful, they will often still target the decoy just because it's the only thing left. But overall, these fights are messier and are more damage heavy than usual. And then there are the bosses. Some are immune to parts of your kit. That makes the fights tougher since you lose some of your core tools. Sirin isn't a boss killer pact, but you are not helpless either. You can still use the decoy to reposition and pepper them with arrows from a safe distance. Not as flashy, but still effective. And now, it's time to wrap up this guide. Wait, right, I forgot something. There's still one more passive. It's called Shrouded. It makes enemies glow when you use Spirit Sight. And you can even pump up to 4 points into it, so they glow more. Well, that's a guide. Hope you enjoyed it. If you like these packed spotlights, feel free to subscribe, and there's more to come.